Hello. Today we have Stephen Mitchell with us. He is the Emeritus Professor of Ancient History, and he is a worldwide known authority on the history of Asia Minor and the later empire. And he published many books and articles on these subjects. But before going into the publications, could you please tell us about your background and your professional life?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here to Muğla. I think my first visit to Muğla, and of course it's thanks to a personal connection to Professor Kaçar, who was my student a long time ago. In those days I was Professor of Ancient History at the University of Swansea in Wales, but I was educated myself in Oxford University, and from 1970 onwards I started to do research in ancient Turkey, ancient Anatolia. I wrote my doctorate between 1970 and 1974 on the Roman province of Galatia, Ankara region, but much wider than that. And I was then closely connected to the British Institute at Ankara, which was then mainly an archaeology institute. And I've remained not only a member, but an officer and a council member ever since. And I concluded my my lifelong connection with them as chairman between 2016 and 2021. So that's a long connection with the British involvement in Turkey, but equally I've had close connections with Turkey since the 1970s, doing mostly epigraphical work, studying ancient historical inscriptions, Greek and Latin inscriptions, and of course visiting many parts of Turkey. The longest single stretch of work in Turkey I did was in the Pisidia region, that is the region of sort of Antalya, Burdur, Isparta, from the mid-1980s, or no, early 1980s, 1982 to 1996, so 15 years of field work, no excavation, survey, measuring, making maps, recording inscriptions, and trying to reconstruct the region's history, because I think I see myself mainly as a historian who uses all these local sources, archaeology, inscriptions, understand the topography and similar background. And of course Turkey from the start was, well, a very attractive country to work in. I found it very easy to get on well with people. My Turkish even now is very primitive, and then it was much more primitive, but I still found it was not difficult to communicate with people, and both at a personal level. Your English, but made very rapid steps when you studied. So I mean, this has been a lifelong occupation for me, and you know, Turkey became very much a second home. It was never quite a home, but it was always the next most important place in my life to wherever I was living. Yes, so ask what else would you like me to say?
Now I want to take you back to your years in England and with Turhan Hoca. We all wonder what kind of a student he was. Can you please describe?
How
did you meet?
Yeah, first of all,
how did we meet? I suppose I really don't remember the first time I saw you. You had written to me, I think, and said that you had a scholarship to come to the UK to study first for a master's degree and then for a doctorate if everything went well. That it had been quite a battle for you to study with me because Swansea, where my university was not a famous university. It was in Wales, it wasn't Oxford, it wasn't Cambridge, it wasn't London, and I think the funding body in Turkey liked that its students went to the most famous places, but Turhan, as he described at the beginning of the lecture, heard of me through an article in the Turkish Daily News written by my old, sadly recently died friend David Barchard, who was a great connoisseur of Turkey, and in fact he and I, David Barchard and I, went to the same college in Oxford. He was 2 years older than me.
Was he a journalist?
He was a journalist. He came to Turkey, learnt Turkish, fell in love with the country, and so and made a career as a journalist, although he would have loved to have been a professional historian, but never became one, sort of, in terms of career. Anyway, he wrote this groundbreaking article in the Turkish Daily News, which you read, and that brought you to Swansea. I remember the first 3 months you introduced yourself, you had to do an English language course, and then started a master's degree, which you finished a year later. And you told me at the start you wanted to study early Christianity.
Yeah.
And that was unique. There was no Turkish historian at the time, as far as I know, who had a serious interest in early Christianity. I myself was not, had just finished my book on Anatolia, and I'd become interested in Christian history myself when I wrote that book, especially the second volume. And the subject for me became a major part of my academic interests. Obviously not religion in the theological sense, but religion, the history of religion in its social context and historical context. And Turhan, I think, was my second PhD student. My first was also a Turkish scholar, Hatice Erdemir. And they were 1 year apart. And Turhan Hoca went on to do, as he told you, he studied this Phrygian heretical sect, the Montanists. I had no idea then that 25 years later I would write a book which I would be able to give to him on Phrygian Christianity, but that is the way that things work out.
İlk 1995 Mayıs ayının son haftası falandı yanlış hatırlamıyorsam. Ben Swansea'ya 19 Mayıs'ta gittim. Ondan sonraki hafta hocayı ziyarete gittim. O şekilde karşılaştık ama daha önce de anlattım. Yani Stephen Mitchell'dan haberdar olmam tesadüfen okuduğum bir gazete. Yani onu da işte İngilizcem gelişsin diye okuduğum, ara sıra aldığım, her zaman da almıyordum. Ara sıra aldığım bir gazetedeki yazı. Ama tabii esas önemli olan şey bu eğitim fuarı vardı, İngiliz eğitim fuarı. Orada 2-3 üniversiteye müracaat etmiştim. İlk Steve Mitchell'dan cevap geldi. Sonra Exeter'den de geldi ama çok geç geldi Exeter'den cevap. Tabii Steven Hoca'dan cevap geldi. Sonra yazıyı okudum falan. İkisini birleştirip tamam dedim. Yani başka bir yerle uğraşmak istemedim. 95'te bu şekilde yani bir tür şey yani artık tesadüfi olaylar ya da işte karşılaşmalar silsilesi bu şekilde şeye gittim, yani İngiltere'ye gittim. Tabii o dönemde bu bir yere müracaat ederken şey istiyorlar işte, letter of proposal dedikleri, yani ne yapmak istiyorsunuz, niye gitmek istiyorsunuz falan. Ben de şey yazdım işte, ben Hristiyanlık tarihi çalışmak istiyorum. Tarihçiler tarafından çalışılmayan bir konu. Bir de Hristiyanlığın kendi kaynaklarından da çalışılmayan bir konu. Bundan dolayı Hristiyanlık tarihi çalışmak istedim. Türkiye'de bilinmeyen bir mesele. Buna da çok ilginç bir şey vesile oldu. Halihazırda İngiltere Kralı, Charles o zamanlar Galler Prensi'ydi. Onun bir konferans metnini okudum bir dergide. İslam ve Batı konferans metninin başlığı. İçeriği de hatırladığım kadarıyla işte İslam'ın Batı için neden önemli olduğunu, İslam'ı bilmenin Batılılar için neden önemli olduğu vesaire falan, bu gibi şeyler, yani böyle bir konu. Bizim tabii 90'lı yıllarda bu Avrupa Birliği vesaire falan, bunlar çok popüler şeylerdi. Gümrük Birliği mevzusu, Avrupa Birliği'ne girme çabalarımız uzun bir hikaye. Fakat yani Avrupa Birliği de işte bazen bilirsiniz Hristiyan kulüp olarak tanınır. Fakat bizde bu kulübün Hristiyanlığını bilen yok. Yani nasıl bir, yani Hristiyan kulüp ama kulübün Hristiyanlığı, yani Hristiyanlık üzerine bir literatür yok bizde. Beni biraz da bunlar yönlendirdi şeye. Steven Hoca bana ilk cevabında yani 2-3 yıl önce çıkmış kitabının 2. cildinin Anadolu'da Hristiyanlığın doğuşu olduğunu, The Rise of the Church kitabının alt başlığı, 2. cildi. Yani biraz böyle şeyler, hani tesadüfi olayların bir araya gelmesi ile ben tamam şeye gideceğim, İngiltere'ye gideceğim. Hatta o dönemde şöyle bir şey de oldu. Az önce hoca da bahsetti. Yani YÖK doğal olarak yurt dışına gönderdiği öğrencileri iyi üniversitelere göndermek istiyor. Ben de YÖK burslusuydum. Swansea'daki eski çağ tarihi bölümü kötü bir bölüm değildi. Yani İngilizlerin 5 puanlık değerlendirme skalasında, ölçeğinde 4, yanlış hatırlamıyorsam Swansea'nın puanı. İyi bölüm, bizim eski çağ tarihinde iyi bölüm olarak nitelendirilen Cambridge, Oxford, Bristol, Birmingham vardı. Bir de Londra Üniversitesi vardı. Ama Londra'da, Oxford'da, Cambridge'de bizim aldığımız burslarla yaşamak da o kadar şey değildi, kolay değildi. Sonra YÖK bize mektup gönderip tekrar şey yaptığı zaman, hani üniversitelerinizi yeniden düşünün diye bir mektup gönderdi. Ben de o dönemde şeylerini açıkladım, gerekçelerini açıkladım. Yani niye ben Swansea'da kalmak istiyorum? Hani sadece şey değil, maddi nedenlerle değil. Yani çalıştığım konunun en önemli uzmanı ve doktora hocasının akademik çalışmalarda önemini de vurgulayan bir şey. Bunu zaman zaman anlatırım. Yani doktor hocasının akademik çalışmalardaki önemi şeydir işte, meşhur aslan ve tavşan hikayesidir. Yani öğrenci bir tavşan, hoca bir aslandır esas itibariyle. Bu yani, durum bu.
I could add that Turhan's arrival in 95, and then he started the doctorate in 1996. And I was interested in, it's a small university, but I was interested in late antiquity already, and that became more of a focus for me. And I had one excellent student, Turhan Bey, had just arrived, and he was finding his feet in the subject. And I then made an alliance between the neighbouring universities in Wales, with Cardiff, with Lampeter. These were where I had colleagues who also were interested in theology, late antiquity, archaeology, Byzantine studies, and so we formed a group, and then we each tried to recruit new PhD students. And I think eventually I had 6 students working and writing PhDs on early Christianity, late antiquity at the same time. So actually you were there at the start of creating a focus, an academic focus, which had not existed before in this subject. And we had seminars not just in our own university, but in different places. So it was a very good, those were my last 6 years in Swansea. I was 95 to 2001. And then I myself moved to the University of Exeter and started sort of slightly different things there. But this study of early Christianity, late antiquity, was a focal point for me in the late 1990s.
Doktora seminerlerinin ilk yılında hoca bir gün yolumu çevirdi. Dedi ki, Cuma namazının saati kaçta? Ben de dedim, ya Cuma'ya mı gideceksiniz? Falan. Yok dedi, seminer organize edeceğiz. Seminer grubunda Cuma namazına giden bir tek sen varsın. Tek Müslüman öğrenci bendim orada. Dolayısıyla dedi, şeye denk gelmesin. Cuma namazına denk gelmesin. Bizim memlekette de o dönemde biliyorsunuz işte 96 yılında şeyin 28 Şubat vesaire falan insanların epey bu tür şeylerden korktuğu bir dönemde yani Cuma namazının arkasından seminere devam edebiliyorduk. Sıkıntı yoktu yani şeyde İngiltere'de.
Do you have any stories that you could tell as an interesting story about you two? Do you have anything in mind?
I think we were telling stories about late antiquity, not about each other, interesting stories.
I can tell a story actually. When I first went to visit Stephen Hoca, I had a book. I didn't know its importance. Peter Brown's the famous The World of Late Antiquity, and he said, "Oh, do you know the importance of this book?" I said, "No." It is. He said, "You are holding a classic book because Peter Brown's The World of Late Antiquity is a kind of it's a kind of Bible for late antique studies. It's so important book. Without reading Peter Brown's Late Antiquity, you can never enter into the field."
Yeah, no, I think it's a magic book, isn't it? Because it's very short. It's 150 pages, and it's written, and it's like a magician comes and opens a curtain, and suddenly you see a new world that you didn't know existed, and it sort of beckons you in to work or to understand this world. And of course, Turhan Hoca ended up by translating the book, and so you know Peter Brown much better than I do, because you corresponded with him and visited him when the translation had been done.
Later on, I became his guest in Princeton.
In Princeton, yes.
And then with Peter Brown's book, Stephen Hoca told me that you have an interest in books. I said, yes. We have a large village in Wales. He said, I will take you there to visit bookshops. And the village, Hay-on-Wye? Hay-on-Wye. The village called Hay-on-Wye, and it's just the world of second-hand bookshops, sahaflar dünyası bir tür şeyde. Bir tanesinin kapısında şey yazıyordu. Dünyanın en büyük ikinci el kitapçısı. Burada 600.000 kitap var. Bir şeyde, kitapçı dükkanında. Ben Stephen take me to Hay-on-Wye. even with your late father as well, because your father was 82, I think, then.
Yes, he died in 1997, and
Yeah, 2 years later.
he was 82, and that
When he died?
He was 80.
Probably 80.
81, I think,
Yeah.
when he died.
Yeah.
Yes, he was a philosopher.
Yeah.
Okay. Talking about books, we have 2 books here. It's just 2 of many. And luckily, one of them has been translated by Turhan Hoca, and the other is newly published. Maybe you can talk about them and introduce them to us.
Yes, well, I'm happy to. I'll speak about both these books because I have to thank the COVID pandemic that both of them have been a major part of my life for the last 4 years, 3 or 4 years. All right, I'm retired now, so I don't have to teach in a university, but when all activity was restricted to our homes or simply going for walks without only one companion, I knew that this was the project that I needed to. I had started it, but I really needed to concentrate on and to finish. I knew what I had to do, which was to work through a lot of material from Phrygia, but it took a lot of time, concentrated, putting the story together from complicated evidence. And I think if it hadn't been for the shutdown of other forms of activity during the COVID pandemic, I probably wouldn't have finished it so promptly. But once I got into it, it was a really exciting book to write, because I thought I knew about early Christianity in Anatolia, but working on it intensively, I realized, first of all, that I didn't, and secondly, that finding out the things I didn't know was actually, very exciting. So I really wrote it in quite a rush, which was quite reassuring when you're in your mid-70s to realize that you still can get excited about something and that it's not just routine. So I'm proud of it. It's a book I'm proud to have written. I think it says some new things, quite a lot of new things. I think it brings the story of and an interesting story up to date, and I hope that it'll inspire other people to think about the importance of an episode in Christian history which otherwise is not very much known or understood, and an episode in the history of Anatolia which is not very well known or understood either. And luckily I was working with a group in fact in Germany and Berlin who were very supportive and were working on similar themes in other areas, so there was a certain community and a certain incentive to finish it. So, well, the product is there, it's finished, and now the world can use it or not if they're interested and judge whether it's useful. It took me back to Turhan Hoca's master's thesis on Montanism, which is this obscure, well, not so obscure, it's actually quite well documented form of Christianity, but the problem is it's always seen through the eyes of its opponents, because it was an unofficial form of Christianity. It was, and so followers of Montanism were thought to be in league with the devil, and
they were Zindiqs of late antiquity.
They were exactly. In fact, I came to the conclusion at the end that they're a lot less important than they seemed at the beginning, because they're exaggerated. The sources always tell you the Phrygians, they're all Montanists, they're all these strange people who live in the hills, and they're not they're not respectable, and we must declare them to be heretics and keep our distance from. All that is said by their enemies and not by themselves, and it's a very distorted picture.
Maybe the mainstream church purposely magnified the Montanists just to magnify themselves. Exactly. Because if your enemy is big or great, then your success is also in the same scale. Exactly,
and the early Orthodox Church felt that it needed enemies. In fact, in Phrygia, I don't think it had many enemies, but it liked to invent them, and the Montanists were the enemies that they invented. I absolutely agree. So they play a part in the story, but not as large a part as I thought they would when I started writing. Anyway, so that's the book, and which I've tried to introduce, as I said, some of the highlights from it this afternoon. The other book is this is the book that Turhan Hoca translated, the second edition, in 2015. I first wrote the first edition of this history of the later Roman Empire. It was commissioned from Blackwell Publishing, who then fused with a bigger American company, Wiley Publishing. And I wrote this in my Exeter years, 2007. It did well. I mean, it's used as a textbook in many American universities, British universities. I think, Turhan, you thought that it would be a good idea to translate it into Turkish, and
I think the problem is in our historical studies, the period from the end of the 3rd century to the, let's say, middle of the 7th century, just before the rise of Islam, this area was not covered well by our famous book. I mean, it was written by a Yugoslavian, George Ostrogorsky. His Byzantine, the history of the Byzantine state, it didn't cover this period very well. And then I thought it would be better if we translate this book into Turkish for our Turkish readership. And I think I did well. I did good job, because the book was first published in 2016, and within 3 years it's run out, and then republished again in 2020, 3 years ago. So next year probably its 3rd edition will appear, because this book sold 5,000 copies within shorter than 3 years in Turkish.
Yes, so. It's extraordinary. I would not have expected it could sell so many. It's a pretty dense book. It's not an elementary textbook. There's a lot of detailed information in it. And
if you want to read a book, you don't want to read this book.
If you want a quick introduction, you have to read Peter Brown's World of Late Antiquity, which he has also translated.
But I think there is a certain difference between Peter Brown's book and this one, because this book introduces you to the whole period in detail. Generally, I make a comparison between Peter Brown's book and Mitchell's this later Roman Empire. Just a meal and paste. if me or Milan, how can we say, pasta, not makarna, but cake. Yeah. If you are, I mean, without having meal, you wouldn't like to take a cake. So this is the main course, actually. This book is the main course for late antique studies, at least for Turkish leadership at the moment. I mean, later on, I'm sure some people will write or will translate other books, and maybe there will be much better books than this. But at the moment, we have, in my view, the best book in this for this field for the Turkish leadership.
Yes, well, I hope it also has its qualities, the same qualities for an English readership as well. It sells well. They wanted a third edition, which is the other project that I was involved in last year. The readers came back and said, we like this book. Some things they criticized, something they said, but we really want the book to cover the origins of Islam as well, the first Arab conquests, the conflicts between the Arabs and the Byzantine state in the 7th century. And the second edition only briefly mentioned this because it went beyond my competence. And I was approached by the publisher, said, would I do a third edition and how would I respond to this criticism? And I said, well, I would love to write about the Arab conquests and the 7th century, but I don't think I can. I'm writing another book at the moment, which is taking a lot of time and effort, and I would have to do a lot of research, and I don't think I'd finish it. And then the editor from Wiley, American, said, well, might you have a colleague who could help? And I hadn't thought of that. And then I thought, well, yes, I could. And it went back to my days in Wales, in Swansea, when in the sister University of Cardiff was then a young scholar, Geoffrey Greatrex, who knew Turhan as well and had worked in our late antiquity group and was now a professor in Canada. And I wrote to him and I said, would he be interested in collaborating in a third edition? And he wrote back at once and said, yes, I like the book already and I'd be very happy to spend time on it. And so he is really the key figure in producing a third edition, which I didn't bring a copy with me, but it's only in English, but is also underway.
We have copies. I gave one to Irem.
Yes.
And I also have one.
Well, you can see the translation team for edition 3.
She's going to play the role of Geoffrey for me.
Okay.
To help the third edition.
Well, when it comes out, we shall have to organize a meeting of the sort of 4 authors, translators, and it will be a great occasion.
But her name will not appear in the cover. I will just say thank you.
And I am not a translator.
Well, I shall let you argue about the credits, but anyway, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing a second Turkish edition, because this one is, this is the Türk Tarih Kurumu, who, magnificent production. I mean, it's a beautiful book, just physically. It's the sort of book that makes you want to read it, whatever is physically inside it. And I don't think many people will read it from page 1 to page 700, but wherever they dip in, I hope they will find some wisdom and maybe not too many mistakes. And there'll be another edition coming out soon. Well, within a year or two. Who knows? Well, Mula, you kindly took me and my wife round yesterday, and I thought it was a very attractive town. I mean, just a very sympathetic town to be in. It's not too large, it's quite calm and peaceful. It's got some nice buildings in it, and it seemed to have a very good atmosphere. You get a feel, you know, people seemed relaxed. The place was very well tended, so I had a very positive impression of Mulla yesterday. The university, well, I've just been here this afternoon, I feel that coming from Britain, or I now live in Germany, to Turkey, it's like coming from the old world to the new world, because, you know, Turkey has changed so much obviously in my lifetime, in the last 20 years, with architectural developments, social developments, prosperity, problems as well, but Turkey feels like a different place, and what Turkey seems to be capable of doing, which the old world is not capable of doing, is actually creating new things, whether they're buildings or institutions or a new sort of context for people to live in. I mean, compared to the Turkey of the 1970s, which I first came to know, and the Turkey now, if I woke up not having seen anything in between, I wouldn't believe I was in the same country. Yeah. And not all of it is, for me, not all of it is positive. I mean, there's been a lot of, I won't say destruction, but sort of compromising of a historical heritage, which is not so easy to see now because old buildings have been removed, places have been modernized, so that you can't see quite the historical continuities that you could see. And maybe as an ancient historian, one's always sentimental about places. You're always looking for, you know, something that's vanished. And the new Turkey is, you know, doesn't want things to vanish. It wants to create an impression of a new, modern, dynamic country, which is what has been created in the last 30 years. And that's been, for me, one of the important experiences of coming back to Turkey regularly over 30 years and seeing these economic, social, political changes taking place with this sort of energy and drive, which is largely lacking at the moment in the United Kingdom, in Britain. Even Germany is struggling a bit now, trying to find, as it were, its new direction in the modern world. I don't know whether Turkey has all the answers. It certainly doesn't have all the answers, because no country does. And, you know, we're all facing huge sort of crises, really, both political and ecological and climate change, which make me very anxious. On the other hand, I don't see any reason to be more anxious about Turkey's chances of making a success of these challenges than I do about Britain's or Germany's. It's a very, very challenging period. But when I regret, as I sometimes do, you know, I go to Istanbul and I see historical buildings which don't look right to me because the restoration is wrong, or there's too much traffic, or there's too many new buildings, and I say, you know, where is the old Turkey that I liked? But then I balance that with this sense of dynamism, which you wouldn't, you know, it's actually been sparked in the last 50 years. It wasn't there in the 1970s.
Just like the same experience with the past, you know, history is sometimes used as spolia to create a new future. I mean, I can only comment on this.
So, do you have recommendations for the students who study history?
Particularly students of Muğla Sıtkı Koçman University students.
Well, I hope that there are plenty of students who want to study history, because I think it's a sort of a source from which you can always draw something new. History is not about looking back, it's about making sense of the past, and then that helps you to make sense of your place in the world. And so I'm very pleased and proud to be a historian, because, okay, I've done a lot of work, I understand a lot of things in the past, a lot of things I don't understand, and I think that so a good knowledge of history is very good for the personality. And yes, I mean, how would I say? I mean, it's my whole life I'm talking about. I don't know quite how to sum up what's the best, you know, what's the...
Stephen, can I interrupt?
Yes.
Many years ago, I had an interview with Steve Mitchell when he just retired from Exeter. And also I did the same interview with Peter Brown. And both to Peter Brown and Steve Mitchell, I asked the same question. How was being a student in Oxford? And I remember they both gave similar answers. If you want to study history, history is a kind of self-study to learn language and to develop and to construct yourself. But a hard working self-study, I guess.
Yes, it's got to come from in you. I think I knew I wanted to do history when I was 16 years old, which is quite rare. I mean, I think I knew that because I wanted to, my father said to me, he said, you know, I know you always want to find out the truth about something. I don't know whether that was right, you know, the truth for heaven's sake. And this was my obsession. Of course, there is no truth. There's only sense that you try to make of things. But that was, so it was always a sort of internal drive. And students who think of history as just learning facts, and that's when you've got them right, got the lists in the right order, the dates right, then, okay, you finished. That's not very motivating, although it may get you a good mark, and I hope it does get you a good mark in your examinations. But, I mean, Turkey is so full of unstudied history. There's not enough high-quality local history, I think, done in Turkey. There's not... speaking about the ancient world, I mean, ancient history is still a sort of a growing, in its infancy in Turkey. I think that anybody studying ancient history of Byzantine, Greek, Roman, or Oriental histories mostly are still at the accumulating factual information level and moving on to a more sort of integrated study of the past, understanding why people did what they did, not just how they lived, but why they made the decisions they did, why they formed social forms that they did, is I mean, there's lots of work to be done, and archaeology is quite a mature subject in Turkey now, but ancient history is still in the developing period. Which suggests that for any ambitious student of ancient history, there is a lot of work to be done here, and they should be able to make a name for themselves by committing themselves to it.
Thanks for coming and being with us today. We had a very nice chat. I suppose.
Teşekkür ediyorum. Ben de çok memnun oldum üniversitemiz adına. Güzel bir öğleden sonraydı. Biraz yoğun. Teşekkürler.
Hepinize de teşekkür ederim.